Hello YouTube, Salivate Metal here, and you're looking at an article here from Small Gold entitled The Last Silver Empire, and it's quite fascinating indeed, talking about the comparison between the United States and the Roman Empire, and how, like the Roman Empire, the U.S. has paid for its welfare and warfare state by debasing its currency. And we saw that even before the Constitution was ratified by the first state in 1787. There is a series called Turn that I'm watching on Netflix, and it's about Washington's spies. And there's an episode where Benedict Arnold is in conversation with George Washington, and Washington talks about how there's no money to pay for anything because the Continental Congress is authorizing the printing of paper notes and is devaluing the currency. And it's quite fascinating. So this is something that's been a struggle since the early founding of our nation. And there's an article referenced here that talks about the Roman Empire's welfare state has been funded by the denarius, which was first minted of between 90 and 98% silver. And over the years, the decline of the Roman Empire, the silver content of the denarius also declined. And this is a very fascinating graph that captured my eye with this article here by Small Gold. And you can see that at the beginning of the empire here, between 15 BC and 64 AD, it had almost 100% silver. And throughout the early part of the empire, it's maintained above 75% healthily above 75%. But even, in times it's kind of gone down and gone up a little bit. But the last time it ever got well above 75% was about 193 AD. And ever since it's taken a pretty steady decline, except for a few exceptions. And then up until the very end here, we see there's very, very little silver, how they debased their coinage there. And this also happened with gold as well. The United States warfare empire is funded by the U.S. dollar, and the U.S. dollar was once backed by gold and silver. But the U.S. empire came into existence after World War II. While the U.S. was an industrial power prior to World War II, it was the United Kingdom, which was itself a silver empire that ruled the seas around the world. The gold-backed dollar became the world's reserve currency in 1944. As you know, the American Empire began after World War II. The U.S. emerged as the world's sole superpower. In 1944, delegates from 44 countries met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and decided that the world's reserve currency would be the U.S. dollar, which would be redeemable in gold by other central banks. And here we see a photo of the Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, where the U.S. dollar became the world's reserve currency. At the time of the Bretton Woods Agreement, U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars were minted with 90% silver. This was not remarkable, as most countries, France, Britain, Mexico, and Canada, to name a few, had silver coins circulating freely among their populations until the mid to late 1960s. So after World War II, the United States began engaging in overseas development. One of the first projects was a Marshall Plan from 1948 to 1951, under which the U.S. would spend over $13 billion to help rebuild Western Europe. That's about $100 billion in today's currency. After World War II, a military treaty with the European recipients of the Marshall Plan, a large the North Atlantic Treaty, the NATO, followed in 1949 to fight the Cold War with former U.S. World War II ally, the USSR, who had annexed most of Eastern Europe at the end of World War II. At the end of World War II, with much of Europe and Asia in ruins, the U.S. was the industrial powerhouse of the world and viewed its mission to combat communism across the globe and as the world's richest nation to eradicate the embarrassment of poverty of millions of its citizens. Presidents Kennedy and Johnson called for the rebuilding of the warfare state. And John F. Kennedy's inaugural address in 1961, he pledged boldly, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty. Johnson declared a war on poverty in a State of the Union address in January of 1964. 4 months later, Johnson outlined his plan to build the Great Society, one that would involve spending heavily on education and welfare. In order to attain the goals of being the leader of the free world, able to pay any price and bear any burden, and to eradicate poverty, the U.S. established and began to grow a massive warfare state. In the early and mid-60s, the U.S. was on top of the world. The vast majority of its citizens has attained a living standard unparalleled anywhere in the world, and it had the most powerful military on earth. And its coinage was 90% silver. To achieve the visions laid out by Presidents Kennedy and Johnson, the spending began in earnest, accelerated, and continues to this day. Coins and paper currency of the United States. At the time of the inaugurations of the Presidents Kennedy and Johnson, U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars were made of silver, and per the Bretton Woods Agreement, the U.S. dollar was backed by gold. But Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution provides that no state shall make any things but gold and silver in legal tender and payments of debts. And here you see a photograph of constitutional silver. The first United States dollars from 1794 to 1840 were made of 89.24% silver and 10.76 copper. Starting in the 1840s, silver dollars were made of 90% silver and 10% copper until the final mintage of the peace dollar in 1935. U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars were also minted in the late 1700s of 89.24% silver and 10.76% copper. Starting in 1836 and 1837, U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars were minted of 90% silver and 10% copper. Dimes, quarters, and half dollars were minted of 90% silver until 1965. And then it talks about the war nickels, which were 35% silver. So very interesting indeed. And more history about the early coinage of the United States. And here we see a graph and a chart showing the amount of coins minted up until in 1964. Then we had the silver certificates first issued in the United States under the Bland-Allison Act of 1878 that authorized the minting of Morgan silver dollars. So silver certificates entitled the holder to redeem them at U.S. banks for silver dollars. So then we see the beginning of the end of these silver coinage and silver certificates in America when JFK broke the long Democratic Party tradition that supported inflationary policies and favored silver and silver mining interests by his public shunning of silver. And JFK's annual message to the Congress in January 21st of 1963, he made a call to remove silver from the monetary system. I again urge a revision in our policy to reflect the status of silver as a metal for which there is an expanding industrial demand, except for its use in coins. Silver serves no useful monetary functions. The emphasis was added. In 1961, in my direction, sales of silver were suspended by the Secretary of the Treasury. As further steps, I recommend a repeal of the acts that oblige the Treasury to support the price of silver, and repeal the special 50% tax on transfers of interest in silver and authorization for the Federal Reserve System to issue notes in denominations of $1, and as to make possible the gradual withdrawal of silver certificates from circulation. And so goodbye to silver coins and silver certificates. Through the efforts of JFK and Lyndon Johnson, the men had urged the vast warfare state. Silver was removed from the U.S. monetary system and its coins. So very interesting indeed. And we're going to kind of scroll down here and talk about how in 1965, with silver out of the picture, the United States massively increased participation in Vietnam, sending hundreds of thousands of troops to southeast Vietnam, which launched the war of poverty of the Great Society. Silver remained in U.S. coinage until 1981, with the U.S. Mint minted 2.2 million silver half dollars, commemorating the 250th anniversary of George Washington's birth. These commemoratives, which legal tender, were intended for collectors only and not generally circulated. And I have those. It's the beginning of the modern commemorative program. But in 1986, from legislation passed in 1985, the Mint began selling 99.9% American Eagle coins to the public. Since 1986, the U.S. Mint has sold about 450 million silver Eagle coins. And here we see the sales of those coins from 1986 to 2015. Notice the massive expansive selling when silver started to increase in price and upon economic instability with the Great Recession. The amount of silver required to produce 29 years worth of American silver eagles to sell to the public is still less than the amount of silver the U.S. Mint used to produce the 1964 dated dimes, quarters, and half dollars. So this is another interesting chart. 215 American silver eagle sales and the 1986 and 2015 American eagle sales. And we see the 450 million there. And the 1964 dimes, quarters, and half dollar, the amount of silver used for that was 549.5 million ounces. Quite interesting indeed. The U.S. Mint used nearly 550 million ounces of silver in 1964 to mint coins for everyday use. Then the article talks about removing gold from the monetary system and how Nixon basically took us off. Well, he finished it off after FDR's executive order of 6102 that removed U.S. gold coins from circulation, and how in 1971 Richard Nixon finished it off. He put the exclamation point on it and debased currency. And since then, we've seen the deficits and everything go up, and deficit spending, and there's nothing backing the paper dollars. No, nothing at all to consider how the U.S. deficit does not include U.S. monetary agent debt of government-sponsored agencies like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Sallie Mae, or costs associated with Social Security, Medicare. Estimates of these expenditures range from $100 to $200 trillion. Wow. In addition to the federal government debt loans, U.S. states also have significant debt outstanding with the U.S. government debt clock. Wow, yes, lots of bad news. And so it's quite interesting to see how things are happening since these two events with Bretton Woods and, well, with the FDR taking gold out, and then Nixon taking us completely off the gold standard, and now we're on a petrodollar system based off of Henry Kissinger in 1973 setting that system up. And that's the only thing that saved the dollar. But essentially the dollar right now is acting upon fiat and as a world reserve currency, as a based off the Bretton Woods system, but it was saved by what Kissinger did in 73. But gold and silver remain, no matter how much governments want to shun it from everyday use as far as being used as currency, it remains money to this day. So thank you again, Small Gold, for this information. A well done article. And one other piece of commentary I will say about it. Certainly there's a lot of money spent on wars, but sometimes those wars are necessary. But the welfare, I think, is overdone. And of course, certainly some industrial military complex that Eisenhower warned us of is certainly something that we should be careful about too. Because there's a lot of unnecessary spending in the military as well. But again, it's constitutional. The military and defense of this nation is constitutional. And wars are necessary. But post your thoughts below. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for watching and encourage you to please rate, comment, and subscribe.